Welcome to Your City Connections, where you get to meet entertaining and informative guests. Guests such as an artist with a brush or with a camera, and guests with a violin. City Connections, providing insightful interviews with favorite son Lieutenant Governor Todd Lamb. To city commissioners, the mayor. Interviews with a rodeo queen, to beauty queen, and even a NBA player. Now, join Steve Kime as he discusses another engaging topic on City Connections.
Hello again and welcome to City Connections. I'm Steve Kime. Thank you for taking time out of your day to watch our show. And as I say so often, I'm just so excited about the special guests that we have that make a trip to Enid, they're passing through, or they're deliberately coming here for a particular meeting, and we get to capture them for a moment and welcome them to the ETN studios. A special guest today is Mrs. Oklahoma 2015, and let me just share with you the Mrs. Oklahoma pageant, some detailed information to set the stage for this interview. It is the official state preliminary competition for the Mrs. America contest, and it celebrates the achievements, the poise, the grace, and the personality of Oklahoma's highly accomplished young women. The competition involves civically engaged married women making a difference by being involved in their communities who are excited about celebrating marriage. And that is the Mrs. Oklahoma pageant, criteria. And to really set the stage for all of that, we have Rebekah Wheeler with us today, Mrs. Oklahoma 2015. Rebekah, welcome to Enid, welcome to ETN Studios.
Thank you so much, Steve.
I understand you kind of have a little connection to Enid.
Yes, my mother-in-law actually lives here, and my best friend from high school lived here for a little while, and her in-laws still live here today, so I've been to Enid several times.
It is amazing. I get to travel in this particular role with the city of Enid, and I was in Oklahoma City at a meeting on Friday, and people were just talking, well, you know, I went to grade school at a particular school in Enid, so there's a lot of people that have that connection. Well, thank you for being with us today. You heard me read the theme or the mission or the purpose about Mrs. Oklahoma, and again, this is MRS Oklahoma.
Yes, married women.
And married women, okay. And what else is the criteria? If somebody's watching the show and say, well, you know, how can I be this Mrs. Oklahoma?
Yes. So a lot of people have questions about a talent competition segment because they hear about pageants and they think talent. Well, there is not a specific talent competition for this pageant. It's 50% of your score based on your interview, 25% on swimsuit, and 25% on evening gown. And that interview competition is only 4 minutes long. So you've got to really sell yourself in that 4 minutes for 50% of your score.
Rebekah, let's go a little bit even before the competition. If someone is even considering Mrs. Oklahoma, what age do they have to be born in Oklahoma, or what is that criteria there?
You have to be 18 years old, a resident of Oklahoma, and a married woman. There's no requirement on the length of your marriage or the any kind of age cap. So, you know, there was a contestant at Mrs. America that was 50. There's no maximum age. So at least 18, married, and live in Oklahoma.
Okay. Well, just to share some of the personal background, and hope I don't get in too much trouble with Rebekah, she is a professional young woman, married, and has 2 children. Yes. And so how do you weave all your mom's life and spouse life stuff into Mrs. Oklahoma?
It's definitely a balancing act, but I read a book called The Best Yes by Lisa Turkhurst a few years ago, and it really showed me that when you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So anytime I say yes to a decision, whether it be with my family, with my appearances as Mrs. Oklahoma, or with my husband or friends, I have to really weigh the balance of, if I'm saying yes here, what am I saying no to, and make sure I don't say no too often to, you know, one certain aspect.
Okay.
It's a balancing act.
Sure. I think that's every day of our life, is the balancing act and so forth. Let me ask you this. How in the world did you get involved in pageants? Is this something when you were in the 3rd grade say, yep, that's what I want to do? Or?
Well, I did always watch pageants on TV, the Miss America, Miss USA pageants. I grew up actually in Texas, in the panhandle of Texas, and I would always watch and loved the glamour of it. Sure. I loved the gowns and the beautiful girls with their sparkly jewels. but we didn't really have a lot of opportunity for pageants in my small town. So as I grew up, once I went to college, I entered some local Miss Oklahoma preliminary competitions in the Miss America organization. And I never won, but I had a blast, and I met some really amazing women through that. So then I had gotten married, had my 2 babies, and decided, I kind of would like to do it again. I had followed Mrs. America's journey, Michelle Evans. She was Mrs. Oklahoma 2014, and she ended up winning Mrs. America. So I had followed her through a mutual friend and thought, how amazing. She's gotten to do so many great things with her platform, been able to speak to so many people. I kind of want to give it a try. So I talked to my husband about it, and he said, if you want to do it, let's go for it. And threw my hat in the ring, and
that's great.
Ended up with this hat.
And yeah, and that's an impressive hat, by the way.
Thank you.
And what you were saying about as a little girl watching the pageants, that just kind of brought back some memories for me with my daughter when she was real small. We'd sit in front of the TV, and we'd watch those Miss America pageants, and there was just something that just drew my daughter to that. It may have been just the glamour, I'm not sure.
Yes.
Well, you are Mrs. Oklahoma 2015, and of course we're in 2016 now, so your reign will come to an end sometime this year. But let's go back to that pageant event. And I believe it's held in Guthrie every year, and my wife and I attended the pageant a couple years ago, so it's a lot bigger deal than I thought it was.
Yes.
So speaking of big deal, why don't you just share with us from that night one of the most memorable events of that. I think it was a Saturday evening.
Yes, so it was Saturday night. The interview competition was Saturday afternoon.
Okay.
So we were in rehearsals on Friday, met all the other contestants. Our interviews were Saturday, and then that night was the final competition. So the very first thing is like an opening number where you learn a dance and everybody comes out and does the dance together. And I was chosen to be in the front row because of my exuberance, I guess. I was very excited in the rehearsal. And when they chose me to be in the front row, I immediately was terrified because I'm not a dancer by nature. And so that's the thing that I was the most nervous about. The whole competition was that opening number dance, which wasn't even judged.
Have fun. My wife, once in a while, if a pageant is on and there's the bathing suit competition or the fitness competition, whatever it is called, I can hear my wife say, man, it takes a lot of courage to do that. And I'm sure you're asked from time to time, what are you thinking? What's your focus? Are you nervous? What's going on in your mind? Because part of this competition for Mrs. Oklahoma is the bathing suit or the fitness, whatever term you want to use, but you're in a bathing suit.
Right.
What are you thinking about when you're parading around on a stage?
So someone told me to channel your inner Beyonce, and that's sort of what I did.
I'm not sure what that is, but okay.
I just decided to be as confident as possible. I had spent many hours getting ready for that competition. That's the one aspect of the competition that I really spent the most time getting ready for, because getting in shape doesn't happen overnight. So I worked out a lot. I worked on, eating a really healthy, balanced diet. And I wanted to show off all that hard work in a positive way and show that you can have a family, a full-time job, a career, be really active in your community, and find time for health.
Yeah. Now, as a contestant, were you able to notice other young women that were not so confident in that bathing suit competition?
Yes. It was definitely, something a lot of girls struggled with, and that was the one thing they were the most nervous about. I was nervous, but not so nervous that I, let it cripple me. I just decided to go out there and own it and show that I had put a lot of work into it.
Very good. Our special guest today on City Connections is Mrs. Oklahoma 2015, Rebekah Wheeler. Rebekah is from Enid, she's from Edmond, but she has an Enid connection, and we're glad that she's able to stop by the ETN studios today to talk with us on City Connections. Well, Rebekah, as a professional, say, woman, mom, spouse, and all of that, you graduated from that school in Stillwater. I went to the school in Norman, the smaller school, but you went to the one over at Stillwater, Oklahoma State University, and you have a degree in broadcast journalism.
Yes.
Did that discipline, did that education, did that have any preparation for, the pageant work that you were doing?
Yes, so my major was journalism, but my minor was speech communications. And I
Okay.
think that those two things coupled together definitely gave me an advantage in the interview portion because I had really learned how to be confident even whenever I'm not confident and be able to speak clearly and communicate well. And I think that did give me a little help.
Yeah. What, as you're going through the, the interview process and the bathing suit and the evening gown, just the entire experience, is there anything from your childhood or maybe an influence from a teacher or maybe even your parents that helped you during that Saturday experience?
I would say probably the number one thing during the competition was hearing my parents, especially my dad, in the audience. He was a yell leader for Texas A&M. So imagine his voice. I mean, it can carry through a crowd.
Sure.
So there were 350 people in the audience, but I could hear him loud and clear. So when it was time for the final 6 to be announced, I could hear him cheering. And when it was, that final question, the dreaded final question, people say, I knew he was out there listening, and so that's who I was talking to when I answered my question. I just pictured my dad, even though I couldn't really see him because of the lights, and just really talked to him. And I think that helped me just feel like, really at ease.
Let's change topics for a moment. Let's talk about your crown for a little bit. Now, is that a custom crown for just you, or is that the standard look of a crown for Mrs. Oklahoma?
Yes.
Or do you hand that off, or is that yours to keep? How's that work?
Okay, so this is the state preliminary crown. So all the state winners get this exact same crown. So
Okay.
Mrs. Hawaii, Mrs. Alaska, everybody gets this crown. My director is also the director for Mrs. Texas. So we do a lot of things together. So we also have the same banner. Some of the other contestants from other states have a different look of their
Okay.
banner, but all the crowns are the same. And I get to keep this one. The new Mrs. Oklahoma will get a brand new version of this same crown, but I'll get to keep this one for a keepsake. I just won't get to wear it as much in public.
Very good. Well, we want to talk a little bit about your, I think the term is platform, and
Yes.
we'll talk about that right after this break. Our special guest today on City Connections, Mrs. Oklahoma 2015, Rebekah Wheeler. And we'll have more with Rebekah right after this. Thank you again for staying with us on City Connections. And our special guest, Rebekah Wheeler, Mrs. Oklahoma 2015, and we were talking earlier about her platform and the opportunity for her to speak to thousands upon thousands of students and young people and individuals across the state. And Rebekah, the platform, as I read it, says, "You are enough, positive self-image." Can you explain?
Yes. So I have overcome an eating disorder that I battled for about 10 years. And when I was deciding what issue I really wanted to champion as Mrs. Oklahoma, when I was a contestant, I really just had to search my heart and decide what is the thing that I have the most personal connection to that I really wish I could tell as many people as possible about. And when I thought back of my journey with my eating disorder, I wished that someone would have told me, "You are enough. You are enough the way you are. You were created perfectly." And just be confident in that. So that's what I've chosen, and that's where I've just kind of taken it and ran with it. I've been able to speak to so many schools, civic groups, organizations, and share my story, as well as encourage them to find healthy outlets for stress and how to identify if you're struggling with positive self-image, or if you see a friend that is, or a niece, nephew, daughter, anyone. And it's been really amazing for my own self to kind of share my personal story that I had been a little, scared to talk about in public. And I've gotten a lot of confidence by being able to just own it and say, yeah, I'm not perfect. I dealt with the same things you're dealing with today. And I can't say that I never have those thoughts now, but I've learned a way to turn it around in a positive way.
I think it's real easy to look at an individual from the third row and looking at them and say, "Oh, they don't have any problems. They've never had a tough day in their life, or they don't know what a challenge is." But when you are given this platform to share with young people, or really to any audience, that, yeah, I am real. I've had challenges, but this is how I've overcome it. Well, that's great that you're able to share that. Let's talk a little bit about the Mrs. America. To qualify for Mrs. America, you have to be a Mrs. Oklahoma or a Mrs. Alaska.
Yes.
when is that particular event? It's got to be an annual event, right, for
Yes.
Mrs. America?
This, in 2016, is actually the 40th anniversary of Mrs. America, and it's
Wow.
typically held in the fall. You know, it varies sometimes from month to month, but it's usually in the fall of the year. And this year there were 52 contestants, 50 states, then Washington, D.C., and then they had a special contestant who was voted on by all of the people of America on the first runners-up. So every first runner-up in the United States got to compete in their own sort of online version of the pageant, and that's how we got 52 ladies at the pageant.
Wow, that's impressive. We were talking a little bit earlier on City Connections with Rebekah in regards to the swimsuit competition, the interview in the evening gown, and I think you said the interview part was 4 minutes long, but that was like 50% of your grade. I mean,
Yes.
it's very significant. Overall, would you say the interview is the most challenging for the contestants, or is it the evening gown, or
I
what?
think every contestant has their own areas that they're just naturally stronger at.
Okay.
For me, interview is one of my areas where I kind of just have always felt comfortable with because of my background in journalism and communications, and I'm just really outgoing and I love talking to people. But other girls, that's the part that they struggle with the most is how are they going to get to know me in that 4 minutes? And at the state competition, it's a panel of judges. So we had 5 judges there for that 4 minutes, and they just all are popping off questions. So you've got to be able to balance, you know, answering the questions. They can all be different topics. They don't necessarily flow together, and you have to show them that you can handle that. Because when you get put in a situation at a school or, you know, something like this, you want to show that you can represent the organization and yourself well.
Since the interview portion was 50% of the competition or the grading, I'll just use the word grading.
Yes.
How do you practice? How do you prepare for that 4 minutes, not knowing where they're coming from with the questions?
A lot of the things I did was to just, you have a bio sheet you submit to the
Okay.
judges. So I was very comfortable with everything on that bio sheet. I mean, who knows you better than you? So anything that was going to come off of that, I was ready for. What I didn't know was like current event stuff that they may ask. So I watched the news, just try to stay as
Okay.
up to date as possible on current events and have have my own opinion formed on different topics. And I think that really helped a lot. I also practiced interview with my husband, with friends. Just say, you know, ask me some questions. Here's my sheet. What would you ask? And that helped a lot too.
Yeah. To the individual, Rebekah, that's watching our show today, and they have interests, they fall in that category. They're married. They could be that Mrs. Oklahoma.
Yes.
What word of encouragement would you offer them, or maybe some things for them to prepare for, or just to investigate? How would they get started?
The first thing I would do is decide your reason why. If you have a personal reason that you want to do this pageant, maybe it's a story that you want to be able to tell or an issue to raise awareness to just find that why and go for it. This is not something that's just for a certain age of people. You don't have to have children. It can be for anybody who has a passion. And so I think just start there, and then contact our state director, Tracy Christ, and we'll give that contact information, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But she's able to give you all the paperwork that you'll need, and then you just really start honing in on who it is you want to be on stage. So for anybody competing, I just try to tell them, figure out who you are and be that person. Don't try to be the last year's winner. Don't try to be the national winner. Be who you are, because you're the best at you.
So we're getting close to the end of the show today, Rebekah, and you got your crown. You're Mrs. Oklahoma 2015, married, professional woman, 2 children. What's next?
Well, I will give up my crown, to the next winner. And after that, I just want to continue to be as involved as possible with the organization. I have met so many great friends through this and really built a family that I didn't have before. I mean, I love my blood family, but this has given me a whole new set of people who are so supportive and encouraging, and I want to be able to contribute back as much as possible. So I will never stop, continuing to talk about my platform and my message. That's never going to be something I'm done with. I've always loved volunteering, and I'll always be involved in the community. But, after this, I will just try to help the next girl and help her be ready for this journey.
Very good. Well, it's been fun for me to interview Miss Rodeo, Oklahoma. We've also had the opportunity to interview Miss Oklahoma, and she was runner-up Miss America, and now we have Mrs. Oklahoma 2015. And Rebekah, when I was interviewing those other individuals, at the end of the show, I said, you're representing Oklahoma. I want to give you an opportunity to say thanks or whatever you want to say to the folks of Oklahoma. And so that thought just occurred to me while we were finishing up. I said, well, Rebekah needs an opportunity to say something to the folks in Oklahoma. So look at that red light, Rebekah, and just share what's on your heart to the folks in Oklahoma if you want to.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for being so supportive of my year. As soon as I won, I was flooded with messages and friend requests on Facebook and people just saying, congratulations, you're so great, we're so proud of you, best of luck, we'll be thinking of you all year long. And everyone I've met has been so gracious and welcoming and encouraging and inviting me to speak at their groups and their schools. And I could not have been more honored to represent the state of Oklahoma as Mrs. Oklahoma. And, I didn't grow up in Oklahoma, but I did go to college here, and I've never left for a reason. And it's because of the people. So thank you guys so much.
Well, very nice. Well, we don't mind adopting you.
Thank you.
As long as you didn't come from Texas or whatever.
Well, I did grow up in
I say
Texas, but I've been here for over 10 years now.
I really didn't say that. Rebekah, very special young woman. Thank you for coming to Enid today. Thank you for visiting us at the Enid Television Network. We have a coin that we always like to present all of our special guests.
Oh, wow.
And as you can see, it has our Enid logo. As you notice on the letter I, it's a stake. And that all has to deal with the land run, all the people who came here for the land run to stake their claim into Enid, Oklahoma. And on the other side of that, you'll never lose sight where Enid's at, because there's a big star on the map. And those three words, the boundless and, the original, those are the words that just really vibrant, represent what the Enid community is all about. And so wherever you place that on your desk, I want to be mindful of this interview, but also the folks of Enid cheering for you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Really, really
well,
nice.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Steve.
And thank you for joining us on City Connection. See, I told you, another special guest, and it's just amazing who comes to Enid. And we're just so blessed to have the opportunity to visit with these individuals. Thank you for being with us on City Connections today. And again, look forward to the next time that we'll have another very, very special guest on City Connections. I'm Steve Kime. Until the next time, make it a great day.